This week in CIST 1510, we'll look at chapter 10 for our discussion for analyze, correct, and improve. We're going to be working with JavaScript. Okay, a couple things I've done already on this. I've already went through the steps here. I've added my name to all the files and the dates, but also the link to the style sheet. I went ahead and added that in, which is a step one, and I added my name and the footer of my HTML. So we'll go ahead and skip this part here and go ahead and knock this part out and verify it. And one thing I did here is when I put this over, I forgot to change the file name. So now this will pass. We're then going to look into the script. We're going to add in the index above the closing body tag. So right here on line 56, I'm going to add a script element. And this is going to link to the script JavaScript file. Okay, so this is similar, just the exact same way that you add in the link to your CSS, except this time we're going to start off with a script tag. We're going to put the link into the JavaScript file, which is in the scripts folder, and then close the tag. I'm going to expand this out a little bit so we can see more of the code. The three files I'm going to be working with in this is my index.html, my script.js, and my styles.css. Okay, so then I'm going to go over to my JavaScript file, and I'm going to look at my function for the pick one. Now, there are some syntax errors in here. There's 6 syntax errors that I need to correct with this. Some of the things that you'll be looking for includes quotation marks, parentheses, curly braces, semicolons, and so forth. So we'll go through this line by line and look at the function. Okay, first we'll look at when we see the word function, that's going to define that this is a function. We're going to use this to display our first picture. Now look here at the instructions. It shows you that pick one function is missing the parentheses. So we'll add those in, and that will pass with that one, or correct that mistake, excuse me. So let's move down to the next line. We'll look at our image source. Let's look at our sources as being the image trunkbay.jpg. Now, keep in mind that you need to make sure that you close each one of these lines with the semicolon. So that'll fix that line there. Now, with MonTap, you can run the checks and see individually if you've corrected anything. So see, it says I've corrected 2 out of 5. So I can see that I have fixed 2 errors, but there's still some more errors listed here. And let's see, in the instructions, it's going to kind of tell you kind of what it's looking for. So we'll go through this and correct these. But this will give you a guide that you can kind of look at some of those and see what MonTap is tested for. It's not something that's going to work out in the real world for this matter. This way, to find errors like this, you would need to validate your code. So we'll go down to the second, the image source.alt. Let me say it's the elevated view of Trunk Bay Beach on St. John. So looking at this, this is the text that we want here. Well, our text needs to be in quotations. We'll put the quotation mark on this and say that now that is text that'll be read. So once again, we can run another check on this to see if that fixes another error. So we see we're now at 3 out of 5 passed. Okay, so error 4 and 5 were on the same issue here. So we're going to know that we're looking for something with the word block on this one by judging from the output. So we have our fig element style display is set to block. Notice we've got to open a quotation, so we need to close that. And then we need to add our semicolon. We'll run the check. All right, so now we're down to one more error here. So we'll look at the next line. We'll see our fig caption is set to text content. All right, so all of our text is in quotations. It's got the semicolon. Notice that we don't have the closing curly bracket. Okay, so that's going to be the final error. So we're going to run the check on this now. We'll see that pick one function should be all correct. So we've passed 10 out of 10 on this. So we'll move down to the next set of instructions. So in here, we're going to create 3 global variables above the comment for pick one. And we're going to begin the comments with that identifies these as global variables. So in MonTap, it's giving you the code that you're going to use here to create the variables. And we're just going to add the comment. Start here on line 6. I'm going to put a space in here. We'll make sure we have the comment saying these are global variables. And then we can just copy this text here and paste underneath that. That's identifying that it is a variable that's been created. So we define it as a variable. Give the variable the name, and then we're setting it to the correct image or the correct code here to get element by ID, query selector, and so forth. So now we're going to add some more functions. We're going to create functions. Now we're going to use function one, function pick one as a basis to create these functions. Okay, so looking at our code here, our set of instructions here, we're going to create a new function named pick two. So what we can do is you can actually copy this and paste this underneath and make sure you change this to a 2, and then we're going to change the image source, the image alt to the correct image, the correct text, and the correct caption, and so forth. The fig element style display is going to stay as a block. So I'm going to copy this because we know the syntax is right. All we're going to do is be changing some content. I'm going to change this to pick 2. And then I want to make sure that I point it to the San Juan JPEG image. So I'm going to replace this trunk bay with San Juan. I'm going to use the correct alt text and just make sure you keep it within the parentheses. And then finally the correct caption. So we're going to run a check now. This should pass no problem. Now we're going to do another one of these. We're going to create with this. Now, one thing I want to recommend is not part of the instructions. I do want to recommend that before each function that you do add a comment saying what's happening in that function. This is not only something that makes it easier on you to go back and find information in your code, but also makes it easier for anybody that may come after you that's working on that code. And so for the next step, we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to create one for pick 3. So I've already done this. So we're going to point it to the correct image, the correct alt text, and then the text content. Okay, so as I said, I've already added this into my styles. So I'm going to click over to styles next step. I've already added my name and stuff in here. One thing I have to do is before the footer rule, which is at the very bottom here, I'm going to add a placeholder, a new rule for the placeholder ID, and it's going to set the display to none. So in here, I'm going to start by adding the selector. So I'm saying that the placeholder ID, I'm going to set the display, and it's going to be set to none. So I'm going to run this check again. It's still going to pass. To run this through. Okay, so I'm going to clear this one off. This one did give me some issues going through this lab. It will only check off 3 of 6 to start with. I went ahead and finished the lab and went back and checked it, and it passed everything off. So let's take a minute here and look and see where we're at. This is where we started. And so this is where we have our name now, our page now. So we see that we got 3 images. So we're going to be able to click on those images and display a full picture of those. And that's what this step here is doing. So we're at an on-click event handler to the first image elements and call the pick one function. Then we're going to do the same thing for the second and the third. So with this, I'm going to click back on my index. And I'm going to come back up to my images. I'm going to adjust these so that we can see if we can get these where we make sure we can see this when we add these in. So at the end of this, after the closing parentheses for St. John's, I'm going to add the keyword on click. So I'm telling this image now that when I click on this, run this function. So in quotations, I'm going to put call the function of pick one. Okay, so let's refresh this. And so when I click on the first picture, you'll see that I do have a full size view of this. Now, if I click the second and third, nothing happens yet. That's because I have to put a on-click listener and then having it call the correct function. So looking at these, I can click refresh this page. So I click picture 1, picture 2, and then finally the third picture. Now, this should check off because at this point, this step is completely done. Like I said, when I went through this before, it only gave me 3 of 6 of these done, as it did here. For some reason, this lab is telling me that these are not displaying the correct images, even though they are. Once I finish the lab, I go back and check this again, and it does clear it off. So I'm going back to my styles, CSS. And in here, I'm going to add a style rule for a figure element. It's going to align it to the center. And then I'm going to create a style rule for the image element. It's going to specify 1 EM padding. So I'm just going to place this right above the placeholder. So I add the style rule for figure. So text align to center. Image padding is set. I'll refresh this. So now we see these are line center. And each one of the images displays. So we'll run through the check on this. Everything checks off. So when I go back to my task, you see it right now I'm at a 94 because of those 3 I did not check off. So we'll run the check on this again. And now it checked off. I can't explain why it's doing that. It's just something that MindTap's going to hang up. I think it's looking for the location where it's at. and you don't have that location until actually setting the next step, setting the styles. Another thing I want to point out while you're watching this video is when you're working through your discussion labs or your regular labs, be sure that you're using the instructions tab, not the task. Okay, the task is going to tell you what steps you need to have completed. In the instructions, from time to time, there are other instructions that are not listed under a task, where it will give you code that you need to put in and other things that you need to put into your project. So once you're finished this, be sure to go back over to Blackboard, research on the internet how to use JavaScript to create an image gallery, write a 100-word summary of your findings. This is due by Thursday. Then also be sure to reply to at least 2 other posts with 50 words each, commenting on those posts or offering suggestions or maybe a different way that you have found to do a task.